Crawford fired me on Monday morning, March 9th. The Vestec closing was scheduled for Friday, March 13th. He did not understand what the license becomes non-exclusive upon separation meant. He did not have to. The lawyers in Stuttgart did. He used 13 words. He said, "Your employment is terminated effective immediately for performance-related reasons documented in human resources." He looked at his watch when he was done. He was 31 years old. He had been at the company 9 months. He had never designed a gearbox. He had never read the long-term incentive plan award that his step-grandfather Hans Bremer had signed in 2014 in the office overlooking the Menomonee Valley, with my name on every page. He did not know that the company's $485 million merger, the one scheduled to close in 96 hours, was built on an exclusive license that had just stopped being exclusive the moment he said those 13 words. I sat in the chair for about 3 seconds. I looked at the single sheet of paper he had placed on the desk in front of me. I did not pick it up. I stood. I walked out. Christina Schneider, the Human Resources Director, intercepted me in the hallway between Crawford's corner office and mine. She had the formal separation paperwork in a folder under her arm. She had been at Bremer Volkmann for 16 years. She apologized off the record, in a voice I had not heard her use before. I signed without comment. I walked to my desk. I took the one personal item I kept there, a framed photograph of Marion taken at her flower shop's grand opening in 2007, standing behind a bucket of white peonies with garden shears in her hand, smiling the way she smiles when a customer just said something she was not expecting. I put the photograph under my arm. I walked out of the building at 9:48 in the morning. I drove to Brewers Hill Flowers on North Holton Street. The drive took 14 minutes. The March sky over Milwaukee was the color of old galvanized steel. I parked the F-150 in the loading spot beside the delivery trailer. The shop was open. Marion was at the counter wrapping a peony arrangement for a hospital delivery when I came through the door. She saw my face before I said anything. She finished the wrapping. She taped the bow. She set it in the cooler. She turned around. I told her in fewer than 2 minutes. She said, "Loyalty goes both ways. He just learned that the hard way and doesn't know it yet." She went back to the cooler. I sat on the bench by the front window. The bench has been there since 2007. It is a pine pew Marion bought at an estate sale on the east side for $60. The pew smells like the cooler, the damp green cold of cut stems in water, and I have sat on it 100 times in 19 years. I sat on it now. Marion brought me a cup of coffee from the pot in the back without asking. I am 60 years old. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1966. My father Otto was a foreman at the original Alice Chalmers tractor assembly plant on West Greenfield Avenue until the plant closed in 1989. My mother Hildegard was a school librarian at Milwaukee Lutheran until she retired in 2002. They are both gone now. Otto died in 2011. Hildegard died in 2017. They were married 53 years. I earned my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Marquette University in 1988. I earned my master's from the University of Wisconsin at Madison in 1990, writing a thesis on planetary gear load distribution modeling under variable torque that exactly 7 people have read in the 36 years since. I joined Bremer Volkmann Industries in May of 1991 at age 25, 35 years. Bremer Volkmann is a privately held industrial gear manufacturer headquartered in the Menomonee Valley Industrial Corridor of Milwaukee. The company designs and builds heavy-duty planetary gearboxes and drive systems for mining, long-wall conveyor drives, dragline powertrains, for wind energy, for marine propulsion, for oil and gas drilling, and for industrial conveyance. The company was founded in 1953 by Hans Bremer, an Austrian-born engineer who came over in 1949, and Wilhelm Volkmann, a Milwaukee machinist. When I joined in 1991, the company had 200 employees and $41 million in revenue. When Crawford fired me, the company had 1,400 employees and $421 million in revenue. I built a meaningful portion of that difference. In 2009, I introduced the X-Drive planetary gearbox family. It is the company's flagship product line. It accounts for approximately $140 million a year in revenue, roughly a third of the company's total. The first commercial unit shipped to Caterpillar's mining division in the third quarter of 2009. I have refined the platform continuously since. The xDrive meets the American Gear Manufacturers Association quality standards, the petroleum industry's gearbox design requirements, the International Wind Turbine Gearbox Design Standard, and 4 other compliance frameworks the listener does not need me to list. I am the sole named inventor on the technology family. In 2014, Hans Bremer, the founder, 84 years old, 5 years before he died, called me into his office overlooking the Menomonee Valley and told me he had something he wanted me to sign. The document was a long-term incentive plan award. It was structured under the section of the tax code that governs deferred compensation. The award contained 2 provisions. The first was a 4.2% fully vested equity stake in the company. The second was an intellectual property attribution provision, recognizing me as the sole named inventor on the xDrive technology family. Inside that provision, in paragraph 11 of the plan document, was a clause the lawyers at Foley and Lardner had drafted at Hans's personal instruction. Hans called it the reversal trigger. The reversal trigger works like this. While I am employed by Bremer Volkmann, the company holds an exclusive, perpetual, royalty-free license to the xDrive technology family. Every patent, every trade secret, every manufacturing specification, every continuation application. The moment I am no longer employed by Bremer Volkmann for any reason whatsoever, voluntary, involuntary, retirement, death, the exclusive license automatically converts to non-exclusive. I retain the right to license the technology to any commercial party on whatever terms I choose. The conversion requires no payment, no bonus, no cooperation from the company, no court order, no notice period. It is self-executing on the legal moment of separation. Hans signed it personally. I signed it. Foley and Lardner witnessed it. The board ratified it on March 28, 2014. A counterpart copy was sent to my outside counsel Reginald Beckman at Foley and Lardner's Milwaukee office. Reg has held that document in his firm's vault for 12 years. Hans told me the afternoon he signed it, one sentence I have not forgotten. He said, "Lloyd, I will not always be here to protect you. The paper will." Marion and I have been married since the spring of 1992. We have 2 children. Carl is 31, an orthopedic surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic, married to a woman named Anki, with 2 grandchildren in Shaker Heights, Hans 5 and Liesel 3. I see them at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and for 1 week every June. Greta is 28, an attorney at a firm in Madison that practices municipal bond work. Single. She calls every Thursday evening without fail. She asks about the shop, about Marion, about her brother's kids. She does not ask about Bremer Volkmann because she has been asking since she was 14 and has decided the company does not change enough to warrant weekly updates. Hans Bremer stepped back from the company in October of 2014. He died in August of 2019 at 89. His funeral was held at the Menomonee Valley plant because he had asked for it. 400 employees came. I carried the casket with 5 other engineers who had worked for him longer than I had. Howard Volkmann, who had been the chief operating officer since 2008, became chief executive officer when Hans stepped back. Howard is competent. Howard is also, since 2018, married to a woman named Helene who had a son from a prior marriage. That son's name is Crawford. In March of last year, Crawford Tilden Volkmann, 31 years old, Princeton undergraduate, Cornell Business School, 2 years at Goldman Sachs in New York, 2 years at a small family office his stepfather's brother runs in the city, was hired by Bremer Volkmann as vice president of strategy and integration. Howard told me about the hire the week before it happened. I asked Howard whether Crawford had any industrial background. Howard said, "He's a smart kid, Lloyd. He'll learn." I did not ask a follow-up. Crawford had never designed a gearbox. He had never read the petroleum industry's standard for special-purpose gear units. He had never been to the factory floor after his first month. He posted content on professional networking sites under the heading Merger and Acquisition Integration in Family-Led Industrials. He drove a leased Porsche. He looked at his watch. In the first week of March, Crawford and I had a disagreement, the only one we would have. He had been leading the Vestec integration planning since January, and he had recommended a post-closing technology rationalization strategy that would consolidate the xDrive design team into Vestec's existing drivetrain engineering center in Stuttgart. I told him, in a 30-minute meeting in his corner office, that the plan ignored the wind turbine drivetrain load cycle data I considered critical to the platform's reliability. I told him the data was machine-specific, field-collected over 11 years, and could not be reconstructed from simulation alone. He told me me politely that the integration timeline did not allow for what he called legacy data dependencies. I told him, also politely, that the data was not legacy. It was the reason the platform worked. He thanked me for my candor and ended the meeting. 4 days later, he told Howard there were performance issues with Lloyd's transition cooperation. Howard, distracted by closing logistics, gave Crawford verbal authority to resolve personnel issues however he saw fit. In December of 2025, Bremer Volkmann's board approved entering merger discussions with Vestec Industries, a publicly traded industrial conglomerate based in Stuttgart, Germany, with roughly $8 billion in annual revenue. The offer Vestec made was $485 million in cash, plus approximately $80 million in assumed debt. The entire acquisition value was premised on one thing: Bremer Volkmann's exclusive, perpetual, royalty-free license to the xDrive technology family. The definitive merger agreement was signed on Wednesday, January 14, 2026. Section 7.3c of that agreement, the key person continuity provision, named me by name as essential personnel and gave Vestec the contractual right to renegotiate or walk away if I was not under employment or a transition contract at closing. Crawford had read the merger term sheet. Crawford had not read the long-term incentive plan award documents for the company's named inventor engineers. He had not read paragraph 11. If you've ever built something for 35 years and watched a 31-year-old fire you in 13 words, hit subscribe and stay with me. I drove downtown to Reg Beckman's office at Foley and Lardner at 1:30 that Monday afternoon. Reg is 67. He was a young partner in 2014 when Hans Bremer's attorney at the same firm asked him to review the long-term incentive plan award on my behalf before I signed it. Reg had spent 4 hours reading the document that afternoon. He had called me back the next morning and said, "Lloyd, this is the most protective inventor incentive instrument I have seen in 22 years of practice. Hans Bremer wrote this for a specific reason, and I do not think the reason was you being 80 years old. Sign it." I had signed it. He had held the counterpart copy in his firm's vault since. He pulled it now. We read paragraph 11, the reversal trigger, together, sitting across his desk on the 18th floor with Lake Michigan gray in the window behind him. Reg read aloud. The language was clean. The conversion clause was 3 sentences. It required nothing from the company. It required nothing from me. It required nothing from anybody. Reg set the document down. He looked at me. "Lloyd, separation occurred at 9:14 this morning." "I know. The exclusive license converted to non-exclusive at 9:14 this morning." "I know. The xDrive technology is now licensable by you to any commercial party in the world." "I know. The $485 million merger's central asset has materially changed 96 hours before closing." I said, "Reggie, send the letter." Reg sent a formal notification letter at 3 o'clock that afternoon by certified mail and email with red receipt to Bremer Volkmann's general counsel, to Vestec Industries' general counsel in Stuttgart, a woman named Dr. Renate Hoffmann, and to Vestec's outside counsel in the United States. The letter noted the reversal trigger had been activated by that morning's separation event, confirmed my continued willingness to consider a direct transition arrangement with the buyer post-closing, and referenced the key person continuity provision in Section 7.3c of the definitive merger agreement. Marion and I ate dinner at the kitchen table that night. The kitchen smelled like the cooler at the flower shop. I had not washed the peony water off my hands from that morning. She had picked up bratwurst from the Usinger's counter on her way home. We ate on paper plates. She did not ask me what Reg had said. She knew what Reg would have said. She washed the plates. I dried. We went to bed at 9:30. I slept fine. Dr. Renate Hoffmann at Vestec Industries in Stuttgart read Reggie's letter at 4:48 in the afternoon Milwaukee time, which was 10:48 in the evening in Stuttgart. She was still at her desk. She had been reviewing the final closing checklist for Friday when the letter came through on the encrypted email. She read it twice. She read paragraph 11 of the attached long-term incentive plan excerpt once. She called Reg Beckman's cell phone at 5:02 Milwaukee time. The call lasted 28 minutes. Reg confirmed the separation. He confirmed the reversal trigger was self-executing. He confirmed Lloyd Hagemeyer was willing to speak directly with Vestek's leadership. He arranged a call for Wednesday morning Milwaukee time, Wednesday afternoon Stuttgart time. Renate did not ask whether the merger could proceed as structured. She already knew the answer. She asked one question that Reg later told me he had expected. Mr. Beckman, is Mr. Hagemeyer open to a restructured arrangement directly with Vestek? Reg said, Renate, he is open to listening. That was Monday night. On Tuesday morning, March 10th at 10 o'clock, Howard Volkmann discovered the letter. He had not been informed by Crawford. He had not been informed by Bremer Volkmann's general counsel, who had received Reggie's letter at 3 in the afternoon Monday, and had spent Monday evening in what Mark Hochstetter later described to me as a quiet, controlled panic, verifying the chain of custody on the long-term incentive plan documents in the company vault. Howard called Crawford to his office. The conversation was brief. It was audible from the hallway. Christina Schneider, who had been at her desk since 7:30 and who had logged her formal objection to the termination the previous Monday at 9:21, 7 minutes after Crawford had fired me and 4 minutes after I had left his office, told me later that the conversation involved Howard's voice rising twice and Crawford's voice not rising at all. Howard called Reg Beckman at 10:30. Reg referred him to Vestek's general counsel in Stuttgart. Reg did not negotiate. He did not explain. He said, Howard, the letter speaks for itself. Dr. Hoffman at Vestek has the same letter. Howard then called me directly at 10:42. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 22 seconds. It said, Lloyd, it's Howard. I did not authorize this. I need to speak with you today. His voice had the thin quality of a man who has just learned that the morning he thought was routine was the beginning of the worst week of his professional life. I did not return the call. Reg had told me on Monday afternoon not to speak with anyone at Bremer Volkmann directly. I followed his instruction. Howard then called Christina Schneider. Christina told Howard what she had told Crawford on Monday morning at 9:21, that she had logged a formal written objection to the termination in the human resources system before I had reached my desk to pick up the photograph. She told Howard she had asked Crawford to obtain Howard's personal sign-off before processing. She told Howard that Crawford had invoked his delegated authority over personnel matters and had told her, in the same 13-word register he had used with me, that the termination was consistent with the strategic plan. Howard asked her to pull up the objection. She did. It was time-stamped 9:21 in the morning, Monday, March 9th, 7 minutes after the 13 words, 4 minutes before I walked out of the building with Marion's photograph. At 11:30 on Tuesday morning, Crawford called my cell phone. I was at home in the kitchen. Marion was at the shop. I was eating a bowl of oatmeal and reading the sports section of the Journal Sentinel on my phone because the Brewers had won the night before and I had missed the 9th inning. Crawford's name appeared on the screen. I picked up. Lloyd, I'd like you to come in. I think there's an opportunity to discuss next steps on the integration, and I said, Crawford, you let me know if there's a written offer from the board. Otherwise, I think we're done. The line was quiet for about 6 seconds. I could hear the hum of the heating system in his corner office. I finished my oatmeal. He said, Lloyd? I said, we're done, Crawford. I hung up. The call had lasted 41 seconds. At 3:14 on Tuesday afternoon, Vestek's intellectual property due diligence team confirmed with their senior management in Stuttgart that the merger structure was materially compromised. The exclusive license Bremer Volkmann had represented it could transfer to Vestek at closing was no longer exclusive. The $485 million acquisition price reflected exclusive licensure. The press release that had been prepared for Friday's closing, 8 paragraphs about a transformative platform acquisition in the specialty industrial drive sector, was killed. Crawford, between Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning, made 4 phone calls to Vestek's Stuttgart office. None of them were returned. He left voicemails in the register of a man who had studied at Princeton and Goldman Sachs and Cornell, and who had not until that Tuesday afternoon been told no by anyone whose phone call he expected to be returned. He made 2 calls to the Bremer Volkmann board members he thought were sympathetic to his position. One of them, a retired manufacturing executive named Russell Ward, told him, per Russell's account to me 9 months later, Crawford, you should speak with your stepfather. I'm not sure you understand what you did on Monday. The other, a Marquette professor emeritus named David Schreiber, who had been on the board since 2011, listened politely for 45 seconds, and then asked Crawford a single question. "Crawford, did you read the long-term incentive plan before you fired the named inventor?" Crawford said he had reviewed the relevant human resources documentation. Schreiber said, "That's not what I asked." The call ended. Howard, that Tuesday evening, drove to Crawford's apartment in the 3rd Ward. "I do not know what was said," Howard told Reg later, in the context of the board emergency session that Friday, that he had told Crawford the delegation of personnel authority had been verbal, general, and never intended to cover a named inventor whose contractual provisions were the foundation of the merger. Crawford's mother, Helene, called Howard at home at 11 that night. She was crying. Howard did not blame Crawford in the conversation with Helene. He blamed himself. "I slept well Tuesday night. Marion and I ate leftover bratwurst. She told me about a wholesale shipment of ranunculus she had ordered for a wedding on the east side. I told her that the Brewers' starting rotation looked like it might hold together through April." She raised an eyebrow. She has been raising that eyebrow for 34 years. "It has never once meant she agreed with my assessment." On Wednesday, March 11th, at 9 in the morning, Milwaukee time, 4 in the afternoon in Stuttgart, Reg Beckman, Dr. Renata Hoffman, the chief executive officer of Vestex Drives division, a man named Klaus Reinhold Förster, and I held a 75-minute video call. I was in Reggie's conference room on the 18th floor. The lake was grey behind me. Reg had coffee. I had water. Vestex's proposal was precise, and it was structured to move fast. They proposed walking away from the Bremer Volkmann acquisition entirely. Instead, they proposed entering a direct exclusive licensing agreement with me, personally, through a newly formed sole proprietorship or limited liability entity for the X-Drive technology family. The license fee would be $312 million paid over 8 years, $39 million a year, escalated 2.4% annually for inflation. Alongside the license, Vestec proposed a 5-year senior consulting contract at $415,000 a year plus travel. I would retain personal intellectual property ownership and could license to non-Vestec parties in non-overlapping markets after year 3 with Vestec's right of first refusal. And I would commit to mentoring Katrin Hartwig, the lead engineer at Vestec's wind turbine drivetrain division, who had been working alongside me on the integration transition plan since the previous June, and who understood the X-Drive design as well as anyone outside my own head, as my primary technical successor. I listened. I asked 3 questions. The first was about the exclusivity window on the license. Vestec wanted full exclusivity for the first 3 years, with a right of first refusal after that. That was fine. The second was about the mentoring commitment to Katrin. Vestec wanted a formal knowledge transfer plan on the same day I signed. Katrin Hartwig is 38. She studied mechanical engineering at the Technical University of Munich and had spent 12 years in wind turbine drivetrain development at Vestec before the integration planning began. She had been working alongside me for 9 months. She understood the X-Drive design better than anyone in either company besides me. The knowledge transfer would take 3 years. I knew that. She knew that. We had discussed it over coffee in Vestec's temporary Milwaukee office in June of the previous year, and she had said to me in her precise Munich-accented English, "Mr. Hagemeyer, I am not trying to replace you. I'm trying to learn what you know before you decide to stop." I liked her for it. The third question was about Marion's role in the new entity. Reg had recommended naming Marion as co-manager of the limited liability company. Vestec had no objection. I took notes on a legal pad Reg handed me. The call ended at 10:15. Reg walked me to the elevator. He said, "Lloyd, take this to Marion." I said, "I will." I drove to Brewers Hill Flowers. It was raining, the kind of March rain Milwaukee gets when winter has not quite decided to leave. I parked the truck in the loading spot. I walked through the back entrance past the cooler and the delivery staging area. Marion was at the bench behind the counter, trimming stems off a bucket of tulips with a pair of green-handled bypass shears. She looked up. I sat down on the bench beside her. The bench by the cooler, not the pew by the front window. The cooler bench is where we sit when the conversation is not for customers. I showed her the numbers. She read them. She set the legal pad down on the counter next to the shears. She did not say anything for about 30 seconds. She said, "Take it, then teach Katrin, and then come home." I said, "Marion." She said, "Lloyd, you've been commuting to the Menomonee Valley for 35 years. Come home." I looked at the tulips. I looked at the legal pad. I looked at my wife, who has run a flower shop on North Holton Street since 2007 without a single year in the red, who raised 2 children while I was designing gearboxes at midnight, who wrapped peonies while I told her I'd been fired. I said, "I'll take it." She picked up the shears and went back to the tulips. On Thursday, March 12th, at 8:30 in the morning, Reg filed the formal acceptance with Vestec Industries. The licensing agreement and the consulting contract were structured as a single integrated package. Reg spent the morning reviewing final terms with Renate Hoffman by phone. I spent the morning at the kitchen table with a pad of graph paper, sketching the knowledge transfer plan for Katrin Hartwig. The plan had 14 modules. Module 1 was the load distribution modeling thesis I had written at Madison in 1990. Module 14 was the field-collected wind turbine drivetrain data Crawford had called a legacy data dependency 9 days earlier. The 14 modules would take 3 years to deliver. I had nothing but time. Greta called at noon from her office in Madison. She had heard from her mother. She said, "Dad, Mum told me the numbers. I don't have anything useful to say. I just wanted to hear your voice." I said, "I'm eating a sandwich." She said, "Good." We were on the phone for 4 minutes. She asked if I was coming to Madison for her birthday in April. I said yes. She said, "Bring Mum, and don't bring a gearbox." I said, "I'll try." Vestec's Stuttgart legal team turned the documents around by Thursday evening their time. Reg and Renate Hoffman executed the final terms by email with read receipt at 9:12 Thursday night Milwaukee time, 4:12 Friday morning Stuttgart time, with closing scheduled for the same Friday. Friday, March 13th, at noon Central, the originally scheduled closing time for the Bremer-Volkmann acquisition passed without event. No closing. Vestec Industries issued a public statement to the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. The Bremer-Volkmann acquisition had been terminated by mutual agreement. Vestec had entered a direct technology licensing arrangement with the X-Drive Technologies named inventor Lloyd Hagemeyer under commercial terms. Vestec's share price on the Frankfurt Exchange rose 2.1% on the announcement. The market read the direct license as cheaper and lower risk than the full acquisition. Bremer-Volkmann's privately traded equivalent valuation collapsed internally that afternoon. The $485 million deal was gone. The board members were notified by email from Bremer-Volkmann's general counsel at 12:22. 2 of them called Howard before 1 in the afternoon. One of them, Russell Ward, the retired manufacturing executive Crawford had called the day before, called Reg Beckman at 1:14 and asked simply, "Reg, how bad is this?" Reg said, "Russell, the company still has a non-exclusive license to the X-Drive platform. They can still manufacture and sell. They cannot transfer exclusive rights to a buyer. The acquisition premium that exclusivity supported is gone." Russell said, "Thank you." He hung up. He called Howard. The company still existed. The company still made gearboxes. The company still had 1,400 employees and a factory in the Menominee Valley and a smaller machining plant in Beloit. But the exclusive license to its flagship product line, the one that accounted for a third of total revenue, the one the $485 million acquisition price was built on, the one the entire transaction had been premised upon, now belonged to a 60-year-old man sitting in a flower shop in Brewers Hill with a legal pad and a cup of coffee his wife had not asked him if he wanted. The Bremer-Volkmann board convened an emergency session on Friday afternoon, March 13th, 2026, at 2 o'clock, 3 hours after the no closing. The session ran through Saturday morning. 6 of the 7 board members were present in person at the Menominee Valley headquarters. The 7th, Russell Ward, attended by phone from his home in Wauwatosa with a cup of coffee and a legal pad. The first resolution, introduced by David Schreiber at 2:45 on Friday afternoon, removed Howard Volkmann as Chief Executive Officer of Bremer-Volkmann Industries, effective immediately by unanimous board vote. Howard didn't contest. He sat at the head of the table in the same chair Hans Bremer had occupied for 61 years, and he listened while the resolution was read, and he did not speak until it was done. He said 2 sentences. He said, "I gave the authority I should not have." He stood up and left the room. The second resolution, introduced by Russell Ward at 3:14, terminated Crawford Tilden Volkmann's employment as Vice President of Strategy and Integration for cause effective immediately, no severance. Crawford was informed by phone that evening by Christina Schneider. Christina told me later she had made the call from her car in the parking lot because she could not make it from her desk. The call was 40 seconds. Crawford did not say anything after Christina read the resolution. He hung up. Helene Tilden Volkmann called Howard at home that evening. She was crying again. Howard told her what he had told the board. He said, "I gave him the authority, Helene. He should not have used it, but I gave it. He told me this himself 8 weeks later at a diner on National Avenue where he asked to meet me for coffee. He looked older than 62. He looked like a man who had spent 8 weeks not sleeping well. He said, 'Lloyd, I should have read the long-term incentive plan. Hans wrote it for you. I should have known.' I said, 'Howard, Hans wrote it because he knew somebody would need to read it someday. It was not supposed to be you.' He looked at his coffee. He did not finish it. He paid. He shook my hand in the parking lot. I have not seen him since." Howard and Helene separated in May. The separation was quiet. Crawford moved back to New York in April. He joined a small advisory firm in the Flatiron district that does not list its clients on its website. He removed Bremer Volkmann from his professional profile the same week. He has not called me. I did not expect him to. The Porsche went back to the leasing company in Milwaukee before he left. The apartment in the 3rd Ward was listed on a rental site by mid-April. The LinkedIn posts about merger and acquisition integration in family-led industrials stopped appearing on the day of the board vote and have not reappeared. Christina Schneider was promoted to Vice President of Human Resources the following month. She sent me a card. The card said, "Mr. Hagemeyer, the objection was the right thing to do. Thank you for being the kind of person worth objecting for." I taped it to the wall of my home office above the monitor. The board named an interim chief executive officer, a retired industrial operations executive named Walter Reinhardt, 64, who had been on the Bremer Volkmann Advisory Board since 2020, and began an external search for a permanent replacement. Walter's first call, on Monday, March 16th, was to me. He asked whether Bremer Volkmann could continue manufacturing and selling X-Drive gearboxes under the now non-exclusive license. I told him yes. The license still existed. It was no longer exclusive, but it was still perpetual and still royalty-free. He could manufacture, he could sell, he could not transfer exclusive rights to a buyer. He could not, without my agreement, sublicense to a third party. The premium that exclusivity had supported, the $485 million premium, was gone, but the company itself was not. Walter said, "Lloyd, thank you. I have one more question." I said, "Ask." He said, "Hans Bremer signed this document in 2014. Did he know this could happen?" I thought about Hans, 84 years old, sitting behind his desk in the office overlooking the Menomonee Valley on a March afternoon in 2014. I thought about the way he had said, "Lloyd, I will not always be here to protect you. The paper will." I thought about the funeral in 2019 and the 400 employees on the factory floor and the casket I had carried with 5 other engineers. I thought about the signing page of the long-term incentive plan document. Hans's signature in black ink, slightly shaking because his hand had been unsteady since 2012, but legible and firm. I said, "Walter." He knew. Walter said, "Then he built a good company twice, once in 1953 and once in 2014. I said, "Walter, take care of it." He said, "We will." On Friday, March 20th, 2026, I filed the formation papers for Hagemeyer Drive Sciences with the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions as a limited liability company. The filing cost $75. The company has no employees. Its sole asset is the X-Drive intellectual property license. Marion is co-manager. Reg Beckman is listed as registered agent. The formation took 12 minutes online and 34 years of engineering work to earn. The Vestec consulting contract started the 1st of April. Day rate, $1,660. I work 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, by video from my home office in Whitefish Bay, a Milwaukee suburb where Marion and I had moved the year before when the split level on South 68th Street we had lived in for 24 years sold for more than I had expected. The Whitefish Bay house is a 2-story Cape Cod on a quiet street 4 blocks from the lake. The office is in the spare bedroom upstairs, facing east, with a view of the neighbor's oak tree and a thin band of Lake Michigan gray beyond the roofline on clear mornings. Marion's commute to the flower shop is 22 minutes through the Whitefish Bay to Brewers Hill surface streets. Mine, from the bedroom to the home office, is 11 seconds. I make coffee at 6:30. I log on at 7. I am done by 3:30. I have dinner on the table before Marion gets home at 4. I have not not made dinner with that kind of regularity since Carl was in middle school, and I was still working first shift at the Menomonee Valley plant before they moved me to the Drive Systems lab full-time. On Mondays and Tuesdays, I work with Katrin Hartwig on the knowledge transfer plan. We have completed 3 of the 14 modules as of this month. Module 1 was the load distribution thesis. Module 2 was the X-Drive carrier bearing interface design logic, the part of the platform that determines how the loads transfer between the sun gear, the planet gears, and the ring gear under variable torque. Module 3 was the wind turbine drivetrain operating condition data I had collected over 11 years at 12 wind farms across 4 states. Katrin takes notes in a way that reminds me of the way I took notes from Hans Bremer in 1991. Not writing down what I say, but writing down what I mean. On Thursdays and Fridays, I do not work. Marion and I take a walk along the lakefront in the morning if the weather holds. I do the grocery shopping. I read the engineering journals I have been meaning to read for 4 years. I visit my mother's grave at Mount Olivet on the first Friday of every month, and I bring a single white chrysanthemum from Marion's shop, because that was the only flower Hildegard ever said she liked. On Wednesdays, I handle licensing inquiries. There have been 6 since April, 2 from mining equipment manufacturers in Australia, 1 from a marine propulsion company in South Korea, 1 from a drilling equipment firm in Houston, 2 from European wind turbine original equipment manufacturers, whose names I will not mention because those conversations are ongoing. I have not accepted any of them yet. The Vestec exclusivity window runs 3 years. After year 3, with Vestec's right of first refusal, the X-Drive platform can serve markets Vestec does not compete in. The licensing income, when it begins, will flow through Hagemeyer Drive Sciences to Marion and me. Carl called from Cleveland on a Thursday evening in early April. He had heard from Greta, who had heard from Marion, who had heard from Reg, who had been contacted by a Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reporter asking for comment on the Vestec-Bremer-Volkmann deal restructure. The Journal Sentinel ran a business section piece the following Tuesday with the headline, Milwaukee Gear Engineers Contract Clause Ends 485 NIDAS Deal. Reg declined to comment beyond confirming the public filings. I declined to speak to the reporter. Marion told Greta to tell Carl before he read it in the Cleveland Plain Dealer's wire reprint. Carl said, Dad, I read the public filings. I have one question. I said, ask. He said, did Hans know this was going to happen? I said, Hans knew it could. He built the document so it would work if it did. Carl was quiet for a long time. He is an orthopedic surgeon. He is used to precise instruments and clean outcomes and paperwork that says what it means. He said, that's a hell of a thing to give a man. I said, it is. He said, Hans is 5 and Liesel is 3. We're coming to Milwaukee in June. I want them to see Grandma's shop. I said, your mother would like that. He said, Dad, I'm proud of you. I said, I know. We hung up. I made dinner. Marion came home at 4:15 smelling like tulips and cold air. We ate at the kitchen table the way we have eaten every night since March 9th, together, at 6 with the windows open if the temperature allows it. On Sunday, April 5th, 2026, at 6:45 in the morning, Marion and I drove from the Whitefish Bay house to Brewers Hill Flowers. Marion drove. I held the coffee. The sun was just clearing the tree line on the east side of the lake. The shop is closed on Sundays. Marion uses Sunday mornings to refresh the stock for Monday. The wholesale delivery comes in on Fridays, and she staggers the arrangement work over the weekend. She has been doing this every Sunday morning for 19 years. For the first 17 of those years, she did it alone because I was at the Menomonee Valley plant on Sundays. For the last 2 years, she has had company. I unlocked the back entrance at 7:02. The cooler light was on. The shop smelled the way it always smells. Damp green cold from the cut stems in the buckets, a faint layer of soil from the potted arrangements on the side table, the sharper scent of the cooler compressor cycling on and off the way it has cycled for 19 years. I set the coffee on the counter. I pulled the first 2 galvanized buckets of dahlias from the staging area behind the cooler and carried them to the front of the shop. Marion was outside at the truck, unloading the 3rd and final bucket from the bed of the F-150. The morning was cold. April in Milwaukee is not spring. The lake wind came up North Holton Street with the smell of coffee from the bakery 3 doors down and the deeper smell of lake water and old brick. I began replenishing the second shelf from the right in the glass-fronted refrigerated cooler with the Monday arrangement stock. A regular customer, an older woman named Mrs. Olshansky, who buys all altar flowers for St. Hyacinth Polish Catholic Church every Sunday morning. Knocked on the glass door at 7:22. Marian opened it. Mrs. Olshansky said, "I know you're closed," but Marian said, "Come in, we're here." Mrs. Olshansky picked white gladiolus from the first bucket Marian had brought in. Marian wrapped them in brown paper. Mrs. Olshansky paid in cash, $12.50. She has paid the same amount for the same flowers for the same altar for 9 years. She thanked Marian and left. Marian closed the door. She looked at me at the cooler. The gladiolus were 3 stems wrapped in brown paper, with the ends freshly cut by Marian's hands at a 45-degree angle, the way she has been cutting stems since 2007. $12.50. The same order, the same woman, the same church, every Sunday for 9 years. Some things in the world do not require a $485 million deal to have value. Some things just require someone who shows up. I said, $12.50. She said, $12.50. We went back to work. I finished the cooler. I carried the empty buckets outside. I lifted them into the bed of the truck. Marian locked the shop door behind me. The sun was coming over the roofline on North Holton Street. The gladiolus were in Mrs. Olshansky's car heading east toward the church. The dahlias were in the cooler. Marian had a wedding order to prep on Monday and a hospital delivery on Tuesday and a standing Thursday arrangement for an orthodontist's office on the east side that had been ordering the same mixed bouquet since 2012. Crawford's 13 words were the loudest sound in the room that Monday. Reg Beckman's letter was the quietest. Guess which one they still talk about in Stuttgart. If you got something out of this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what part stayed with you. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe and ring the notification bell so the next one shows up. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.